Section 10 of the Life of Samuel Johnson, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Andrew Coleman. The Life of Samuel Johnson, Volume 1, by James Boswell. Section 10. It has been generally said, I know not with what truth, that Johnson offered his London to several booksellers, none of whom would purchase it. To this circumstance Mr. Derrick alludes in the following lines of his Fortune a Rhapsody. Will no kind patron Johnson own? Shall Johnson friendless range the town, and every publisher refuse the offspring of his happy muse? But we have seen that the worthy, modest, and ingenious Mr. Robert Dodsley had taste enough to perceive its uncommon merit, and thought it creditable to have a share in it. The fact is, that at a future conference he bargained for the whole property of it, for which he gave Johnson 10 guineas, who told me, I might perhaps have accepted of less, but that Paul Whitehead had a little before got 10 guineas for a poem, and I would not take less than Paul Whitehead. I may here observe that Johnson appeared to me to undervalue Paul Whitehead upon every occasion when he was mentioned, and, in my opinion, did not do him justice. But when it is considered that Paul Whitehead was a member of a riotous and profane club, we may account for Johnson's having a prejudice against him. Paul Whitehead was indeed unfortunate in being not only slighted by Johnson, but violently attacked by Churchill, who utters the following imprecation: May I, can worse disgrace on manhood fall, be born a Whitehead, and baptized a Paul. Yet I shall never be persuaded to think meanly of the author of so brilliant and pointed a satire as Manners. Johnson's London was published in May 1738, and it is remarkable that it came out on the same morning with Pope's satire, entitled 1738, so that England had at once its Juvenal and Horace as poetical monitors. The Reverend Dr. Douglas, now Bishop of Salisbury, to whom I am indebted for some obliging communications, was then a student at Oxford, and remembers well the effect which London produced. Everybody was delighted with it, and there being no name to it, the first buzz of the literary circles was, Here is an unknown poet, greater even than Pope; and it is recorded in the Gentleman's Magazine of that year, that it got to the second edition in the course of a week. Note. Sir John Hawkins, page 86, tells us, The event is antedated in the poem of London, but in every particular, except the difference of a year, what is there said of the departure of Thales must be understood of Savage, and looked upon as true history. This conjecture is, I believe, entirely groundless. I have been assured that Johnson said he was not so much as acquainted with Savage when he wrote his London. If the departure mentioned in it was the departure of Savage, the event was not antedated, but foreseen, for London was published in May 1738, and Savage did not set out for Wales till July 1739. However well Johnson could defend the credibility of second sight, he did not pretend that he himself was possessed of that faculty. End of note. One of the warmest patrons of this poem on its first appearance was General Oglethorpe, whose strong benevolence of soul was unabated during the course of a very long life, though it is painful to think that he had but too much reason to become cold and callous, and discontented with the world, from the neglect which he experienced of his public and private worth by those in whose power it was to gratify so gallant a veteran with marks of distinction. This extraordinary person was as remarkable for his learning and taste as for his other eminent qualities, and no man was more prompt, active, and generous in encouraging merit. I have heard Johnson gratefully acknowledge, in his presence, the kind and effectual support which he gave to his London, though unacquainted with its author. Pope, who then filled the poetical throne without a rival, it may reasonably be presumed must have been particularly struck by the sudden appearance of such a poet; and, to his credit, let it be remembered that his feelings and conduct on the occasion were candid and liberal. He requested Mr. Richardson, son of the painter, to endeavour to find out who this new author was. Mr. Richardson, after some inquiry, having informed him that he had discovered only that his name was Johnson, and that he was some obscure man, Pope said, "He will soon be déterré." We shall presently see, from a note written by Pope, that he was himself afterwards more successful in his inquiries than his friend. That in this justly celebrated poem may be found a few rhymes which the critical precision of English prosody at this day would disallow, cannot be denied; but with this small imperfection, which in the general blaze of its excellence is not perceived till the mind has subsided into cool attention, it is undoubtedly one of the noblest productions in our language, both for sentiment and expression. The nation was then in that ferment against the court and the ministry, which some years after ended in the downfall of Sir Robert Walpole; and as it has been said, that Tories are Whigs when out of place, and Whigs Tories when in place, so, as a Whig administration ruled with what force it could, a Tory opposition had all the animation and all the eloquence of resistance to power, aided by the common topics of patriotism, liberty, and independence. Accordingly, we find in Johnson's London the most spirited invectives against tyranny and oppression, the warmest predilection for his own country, and the purest love of virtue, interspersed with traits of his own particular character and situation, not omitting his prejudices as a true-born Englishman, not only against foreign countries, but against Ireland and Scotland. On some of these topics I shall quote a few passages. The cheated nations happy favourites see, mark whom the great caress, who frown on me. Has heaven reserved in pity to the poor no pathless waste or undiscovered shore, no secret island in the boundless main, no peaceful desert yet unclaimed by Spain? Quick let us rise, the happy seats explore, and bear oppression's insolence no more. How, when competitors like these contend, can surly virtue hope to fix a friend? This mournful truth is everywhere confessed, slow rises worth, by poverty depressed. We may easily conceive with what feeling a great mind like his, cramped and galled by narrow circumstances, uttered this last line, which he marked by capitals. The whole of the poem is eminently excellent, and there are in it such proofs of a knowledge of the world, and of a mature acquaintance with life, as cannot be contemplated without wonder, when we consider that he was then only in his 29th year, and had yet been so little in the busy haunts of men. Yet, while we admire the poetical excellence of this poem, candour obliges us to allow that the flame of patriotism and zeal for popular resistance with which it is fraught had no just cause. There was, in truth, no oppression. the nation was not cheated.